So,
to
wait a
inherit
minute, I
the
got to
wind.
ask you, is there like a musical theme that'll come up that'll present me? Is there?
Sure.
Dun, 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 dun.
No, I don't think. Yeah, wouldn't that be? Yeah, yeah. He'll put that in post.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. So you're talking about my older brother and what kind of influence it had
Danny
on me.
Kamin, right?
Yeah, right. Well, like I said, I mean, Danny was, I would watch him at a distance. Like I think he was in junior, like junior high school,
Right.
And he introduced the twist on a talent show, and I was going like, wow, look at that! Look at my brother up there doing the twist. I can't wait to get up on the stage, and I don't know what the next thing will be. That
Yeah.
type of thing.
Oh, how cool!
So I mean, yeah, I think he laid the framework, and we had this. We all shared this sort of common virus about trying to do something entertainingly.
Right. Right.
I felt like the applause lasted longer by writing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like that's how that started.
Did you start when you started? Well, this is Kamin, by the way. This is my friend from. I am like his older brother from Victoria, Texas, where we grew up, and we grew up in the late 50s and early 60s, and growing up through that time, right? I mean, you were in high school. What year did you graduate?
1947.
No, graduate.
Oh, graduated.
Come on.
No, let's see. Graduated 1972.
1972. All right. So I graduated in '66. So we had that time period, and so did you want to go into advertising right away? I mean, were you a writer in high school and know that you wanted to go in there? Because Tuck has done advertising and has written books and is continuing to have so much. Anyway, all this we'll talk about. But anyway, continue on your journey on getting into.
Well, I mean, in high school, I did some theater, and then I selfishly got caught up in. I was going to school in the Northeast, and it was one of those situations where I'd gone through high school for 3 years, and then my sister-in-law said to my mother, "What about Tuck just going away to the school?" And I thought this would be really great. So I had the lead in this show. It was everything fantastic. I would make the cast wait. And I got thrown off the show, and it just killed me. So it kind of made me shift a little bit in terms of figuring out if I want to do acting.
Right.
And I was enjoying writing forever. And when I was a little kid, I would write these ridiculous sales for my father's furniture store, whether, like a fire sale or we got to get it out the door sale and stuff like that. So I thought I wanted to go into journalism, and then I decided to go into advertising and I was at UT,
Right.
and got an advertising degree, and then
Right.
I worked in Austin, and then I saw these great ads that were being written in New York, and I said, what the hell am I doing here? So then I went off to New York.
So you were in the post Mad Men era.
Yeah.
In New York, right?
Yeah,
So what was that like? What was it?
There
What was
there were a couple of these guys around. I was carrying this huge portfolio case, and you had all these ads laminated that you'd worked on. And I went to see this guy. His name was Shep Kernett, and he was at an ad agency called Ketchum. And at that time, I think they had Firestone or something like that.
Yeah.
This was 2 weeks before Christmas, and it was a little nerve-wracking because how the hell are you going to land a job? But fortunately, anyway, I went to this office of Shep, and this woman who had known my mother, who knew this other lady, introduced me, and somehow she wiggled me into this guy's office. And he says, "Kid, let me see your stuff."
Yeah.
And I said, so I started opening this portfolio, and he puts his hand on the wall and says, and it's 10 o'clock, Dennis. He moves the wall away, and it's a huge, big-ass bar with everything, and is asking me if I want to have a drink. So there were these guys that were there, and mostly what was left when I was there were some really, really amazing riders.
Yeah.
And they would come in incredibly early in the morning. And then they would go out at lunch, and they'd be asleep at their desks from drinking so much alcohol until about 3 o'clock. But they had already done all their riding from 6 to noon. I mean, they just were brilliant riders on. I was working on Smirnoff vodka and Citibank, and actually, I wasn't working on Smirnoff vodka at the beginning. I was working on Citibank because of an advertising campaign I did for Nolte National Bank in Seguin, Texas. And they loved this campaign, hired me 2 weeks before Christmas. And so there were these guys that were around, and boy, they just could throw it back. I have some kind of genetic repellent to where I tried to continue to drink and would just throw up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And but there were a number.
It is there for grace of God. For me.
Oh, is that
it's
right?
the same. Yeah, it's
that
the
right?
same thing. I
Yeah.
have the same thing.
And
it just doesn't take.
Yeah, I gave it as many runs as I possibly could. But when I was in New York, there were some of these guys around.
Yeah.
And to sit at their feet, so to speak, and hear how passionate they were about their riding. And at that time, the only guy I think that was a really fantastic episode that I can tell you about is there were co-creative directors. There was an art director and a writing creative director. And one of the salesmen, I could see from my inside office, because I did not have a window office at 23 years old. I saw this guy walk down the hall, ask the young salesman to come out, and just knocked him out. And then he went back to his office, got his box of whatever, and left. And what had happened is that I said, "What the hell happened?" He said, "Well, he went into the sales guy's office because the sales guy presented the advertising campaign."
Yeah.
And he just nervously says to the client, "You don't like anything that's here, we can come back." This guy had blood, sweat, and tears on this stuff, and you never do this. So this guy was like it was like a gun that had just been ready to, the trigger was ready to hit. And
Yeah.
of course, when he knocked him out. But that's what, those guys were really fantastic. And there were a couple of guys that were a little bit older than I was, and I had to prove my mettle to get in with their group because, I would almost like have to take my work to these guys before I took it to my creative director.
Yeah.
Because we were part of this brotherhood. And it was full, rich passion of stuff.
So did it really work on your creativity? Did that kind of exercise help? Because sometimes I have found over my life that in those situations like that I can get beat down, and it can. But it's.
I was so scared because and I'll tell you what I was doing to talk about creativity. At 20, I was looking at all of the ads going like, how the hell am I here? And I started looking at these ads, and I was almost like, I was looking at all these ads that I really loved. At that time, they were in Esquire magazine, or they might show up in Fortune or Playboy magazine.
Yep.
Really, really great ads. I mean, written really well. So, I'd be looking at all that stuff, and then I would get the assignment that I had to come back the next morning with headlines, and I would be looking at the subway track thinking about how the hell am I going to come back with this. And I'd see a rat, that would be running down the track, and I'd go like, that's me. I'm going to get killed by a train. So then I got into that moment where I somehow, and I do my best writing is like really early in the morning. And I would be, I'd be thinking on the subway, I'd be, get to the agency before anybody. I'd get into the agency and I'd be working away. So it really kind of, I think the discipline came from being scared shitless to be able to try to do this stuff.
Exactly.
So that's where it came from. And, it's just one of those things where I got to the point of recognizing that in a very serious way of knowing that I could go to the well and pull that stuff up.
God, that's so. And then what impelled you to come back to Austin?
Well, at that time, what had happened is my ex-wife, she was an art director. I was a writer. She was working in an advertising agency. And I said we were going to be there 2 years.
Sure.
It turned into 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And, we're clocking into 6, and she says, I want to go back. And we wanted to have children. And, you watched families, no matter how wealthy they were, they let their kids out of a cage into Central Park. I mean, it was, it was not the most family-friendly place to be.
Right.
Or you'd have to move way out to Connecticut and live up there and then sit on the train for 2 hours every morning. Mm-hmm. So what happened is she moved back, and it took me 3 months before I finally, unhinged my not cold dead fingers from there, but I finally found the job, which was, brought me back here to Texas.
And so this experience then, and then you became a father.
Right.
Can you talk about this in one of your books that you have in one of your CDs in All My Fathers? You talk about the fathering principle, about being about how all these men fathered
right.
So how what did being a father change you? How did that?
I think what it was is that I was I sort of, my dad could talk to anybody on the street, and he would probably try to sell them a sofa or a dinette, something for the kitchen or that type of thing. But I watched him, and at a certain period of time when I was really young, my dad had this furious temper that he would smack the back of my brother's head, or, so just he would bring all this tension back from the furniture store, from crazy ass customers, or people that would, companies that would deliver broken furniture and all that kind of thing. So this leads into All My Fathers, in the sense that I spent, when I was about 10 years old, I was trying to figure out how could I fix my dad's temper.
Yeah.
And I started doing kind of what he did, and you knew some of these men in the town. I would go to like this little grocery store where this guy would give me super bubble gum, which was the greatest thing in the world to me, for my pennies. And I would talk to him about it, and he would talk to me about the world. And then I'd go up to the movie theater where Mr. Yates was the manager, and he would tell me about the movies. And I thought, you know what? This is awesome. So I would go, and I'd go to the funeral home, and Willie, who was the funeral guy, we'd go down to the dump. And God knows what he was throwing away down at the dump. But there I discovered comic books that had a slight odor to them, but it was just incredible, because they would cut the covers off these comic books and leave them, throw them away. The point about all this is, and I'm actually going to get to the point, is that I would talk to my kids as if they were adults, and my parents would go like, you're talking to your kid like they're an adult. And I go like, yeah.
They're a human being.
They're human beings. So
why don't you talk to them?
It shifted a lot for me, because I saw the way that my dad kind of talked to me as an adult. My mother didn't.
Yeah.
It would be all this weird language that would be something that would be like Yiddish with fairy tones and I don't know what other kinds of things, that kind of business. Yeah. But for my children, I would tell them, I would try to encourage them to talk to whomever out there.
Yeah.
And that led me to figure out how could they have a higher level of sense of freedom about themselves. And so, like when my oldest daughter, who's this extraordinary artist now that has been in national museums, her name is Calder Kamin. I got her a little table at the Sammy show, or the art, and she at 8 years old, she was selling her little stuff, so she had that kind of confidence. And it was like, I was thinking about, that was just really important to me. And then my other daughter, Mathilde, is this immigration attorney, and she wasn't trying to, she wasn't like getting immigrants out of Victoria at 9 years old or anything. And then my youngest, who always liked Blythe, had always liked these things about nature. But it was finding out what were they interested in, and then at the same time go and find the people that are in this field and have a conversation. Because my father would say, listen to me, at the end of your next conversation could be a lifelong friend, whomever it is. And so that's sort of the father thread that I really wanted them to catch hold of.
When you and one so in growing your family and growing into who you are, and here we are at our age, and you and I both looked at people when we were when we were young and in our teens and on. Look at people who were 60 or looked at people who were 70. I'm 70 this year, and it just seemed. I didn't know what that would be like. I didn't even think, but now we are. And now you're in part of your program of what you're doing is that you've created an entire research project, a worldwide research project called Design Your Age. Would you talk about that?
Sure. I mean, the whole idea of that started from I was on a trip and I met some individuals. A woman was 84 and a man was 92.
Right.
And I was going, how are these people? They're so active. They're so ageless. And I started looking for books on it, and I realized this is a frigging rebranding assignment.
Yes.
I mean, it was like one of these problems because so the book is really this sort of crazy book from soup to nuts about how to see yourself. Why is it better now? There's a chapter in there of these older individuals that was probably the most popular part of that book, of why they feel their life is better now, where you will live. Is there a value of yourself that you could find as you grow on, and even on to a woman that talks about immortality. And it was the whole part of this is that every day when we talk about older and aging,
exactly, and the word old. I mean, when we talk about rebranding,
right.
There is such a pejorative. There's so many pejoratives that are associated with the word old.
Well,
we're having to say, all right, how am I want to do that because I want to have the most engaging, amazing. I want this life to be the best part of my life so far.
And here's what, up to this point, which is in this new book that I'm doing called What's Best About You Never Ages, which will be out next year. Here is what was this little piece for me, is that forget about the framework of how we see ourselves. Don't tell anybody what your number is. That is bullshit.
Right.
Because that goes like, okay, we've got you back in this little pocket. You should be doing this. This part of you should be falling off. What I've discovered in just this little piece of research, and I know lots of people share this idea, so I'm not saying I'm the only person that's come up with it.
Thank God.
Is you think about what would be really cool for your later years. Mm-hmm. Reimagine the world and make a list and say, I want the world, or I want myself to believe this is how I will be. I will still be curious. I will still be active in whatever way possible. I will still try some new things. I will still, for God's sakes, get out of my house, get out of my apartment or whatever and meet somebody new, get out of my comfort zone. So there's this kind of point where age is really, I have this scientist, because I did a lot of talking to different scientists, and where I've been bending now is more into psychology, but the scientist said to me, age is a lot about denial.
Yeah.
We know the things that we need to do. We know we have to figure out how to cut sugar.
Exactly.
We have friends that back in our hometown that'll go through Dairy Queen and get extra gravy on their chicken fingers.
Certainly.
And wonder why their Lipitor doesn't work.
Sure.
So the point about that is that and that stuff is extraordinarily addictive. I mean, there's all kinds of problems with
there's
food,
there's
right?
no question.
So the point about it is that if you can, and I'm going to be working on a project like this, in terms of trying to ask people how they would like the world to be.
Sure.
Go to that. Imagine as far as you can and start putting that down. There has to be a new measurement of our experience.
Has to be.
And it's not about cutting millennials out of jobs, but really, changing how we how we see ourselves. And like the three worst words I think that are out there are respect your elders. It's bullshit. I mean, where we are is elders need to figure out a way to respect themselves again.
Thank you, and I love that you're focusing on the psychological part, because as I was talking to Brian Foster or Alan on another program, is exactly it's our external world will reflect our internal world. I mean,
True,
there's so
yeah.
much about, so how much work do I have? And I've got plenty to do inside. I believe me, I don't have to judge anyone out there, because I got plenty to do, plenty of growing, learning. How am I going to keep curious? How am I going to keep facile and make sure that I have a flexibility of my attention, that I'm paying attention to things that are uplifting rather than continuing to, I dine on umbrage. I mean, I'll take umbrage and I'll just, that self-righteousness. And
Yeah.
oh man, that stuff is addictive.
Yeah.
That is, and so I got to watch it. I got to be very careful about how much of that I take in.
Right. No, I mean, there is so much. There's so many exciting things that I see in this landscape, which is almost desert-like, meaning that desert from this other perspective.
Yeah.
You know, just like you were saying, you know, we need to get rid of the word senior. We need to get rid of the word frail and elderly.
Yep.
I mean, there's wonderful words like perennial. There's you know, there's this other word that I was coining through what I was doing called potential being, and
Right.
But there's a lot of other language that can be used,
And language is important.
yeah,
What the words I use to define myself are those limiting words, and so I mean, you know that as an advertising guy. I mean, you know the words that, in the beginning, that was the word.
right, yeah, and so I mean, I think it's. You know, the primary jokes that are out there about olding are about olding. There's one.
Holding, there you go.
About aging are something about, you know, I laughed so hard my arm fell off. My point about all that is that I like the idea of really turning this thing upside down and making fun of people who say they're too old.
Yeah.
Now, there might be some kinds of mental illness problems there.
Certainly.
Where they're stuck in a depression.
Yep.
But, you know, that's one of the most important vitamins that's extraordinarily important and really, I think, life affirming is humor.
Yep.
And so I think looking at how, you know, sort of remind ourselves, what do we find that's funny, for God's sakes, right?
Exactly. Well, I've been working on that. I've been working on a comedy routine where I say that my testosterone has dropped down a quart low. I can suddenly see over it.
Oh, wow.
I actually have empathy. I didn't have that when my testosterone was so high, so it has really helped me.
Right.
I've become a much better human now that that's happened, and I'm learning a lot more empathy.
That's terrific. That's good.
So that's I think that there's a lot. There must be something. I can't believe. I see everything, all of nature, and everything has these wonderful cycles, and there's part. And I can't believe that aging, and this time of elderhood, would be just left at the end, just this wasted time. You know, that there has to be some value here that I'm not seeing.
Oh, and
I need to dig into.
I think you're right. I mean, the thing is that people are not moving into these restricted age communities the way they used to.
Right.
They want to live in multi-generational facility. You know, not a facility, but community.
Exactly, community. We are tribal.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then you look out through history, the most progressive, the most creative, the most thoughtful types of progressive cultures were diverse in race, religion, age, everything. No, I mean, it's throughout that way.
Exactly.
But, you know, but there was this really cool thing for stockholders, that there was assembly line, that you went through these different stages, and I could build a fence around this thing, and you could go and live there. And you could see kids at Christmas come and sing Christmas carols.
Yeah.
But the fact that if there's a new way of doing apprenticeships and mentoring, and realizing with the high cost of academic education, to be able to work with these people that I define as masters of age in all these different disciplines, including as an electrician or a plumber or whatever. That is a wholly new opportunity
Totally.
for older individuals.
And because it gets us in, I believe, Tuck, that we are purpose-driven beings. When we are purposeless, I'll give you an example. I look at a service animal, and I see a dog that is, that's guiding someone who's blind. Or I see, and there is something different. When I look into that dog's eyes, there's purpose there. That isn't just, it's just sitting around and there is real purpose in that. And I think I feel the same way in our lives, that we are purpose-driven beings, and and when I lose purpose, I lose what I'm here to do.
Yeah, I think you have to have a lot of passion about that, and it's interesting you say that, because there's an assessment that I'm incorporating. Probably it'll be around June. That it's where do I go from here, and it's really focused on people from 69 to 75.
Nice.
Most of the work that I am focused on are boomers.
Yep.
So where do I go from here is answering that piece that I'm working on, and there is so many incredible assessment tests that have been around for 60 years. It's not just Amazon telling you this is the book because you like that book, you'll like this book.
Right.
So having that kind of technology that's even been more refined is going to be fantastic. One of the other areas that I see that is coming is that we'll be able to identify nutrients. You're a vitamin A, I'm a vitamin whatever.
Right.
And you'll be able to have that information, because every week or 2 weeks there's the vitamin of the week, or it's something weird like snail's darter feces in Patagonia in July.
Oh yeah, God,
yes.
Excuse me, I'm
right. Yeah, or you take it as a colonic. It's like all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, but knowing that information, I think is going to really be a breakthrough, as well as figuring out your designing exercise according to your musculature, and then also just understanding what would be incentives that would get you to do something.
Right.
I talked to again. I remember I was out at this place called the Buck Institute in California. He says, and this one fellow said to me, "I think you need to tax people.
What?
You need to tax them if they're fat." And I said, I don't know that that's going to be the best thing, but he was just talking about sometimes there has to be, some sort of situation where people will respond and figure out a way that, okay, well, you guys, if you're going to, how you take care of yourself,
right?
That's going to be how you, what your insurance will be, and that type.
One of my clients is a major hospital chain, and I was talking to the COO in the chain, and we were talking about that, and I said, and we were talking about how that we have to figure out some way that hospitals get rewarded for keeping people healthy,
right?
Not keeping people in. It's the same way with it. How do we work that reward system so it actually, that's how our insurance works? Because it's not going to work. There is no way that we're going to be able to insure ourselves or doctor our way out of this. There's got to be some way that we can go.
Plenty of room for new ideas out there.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, let's give us some new ideas.